Hi, my name is AJ, and this is my presentation called The Economic Horseshoe. Hope you enjoy it, and I hope you learn something from it. So, for a little context, in the 21st century, it's widely known that we are in what's called a time of late stage capitalism, where capitalism has been unregulated for far too long, and it's allowed many powerful corporations to completely monopolize entire markets and entire industries and allow them to have extreme leverage over the consumers and for the over the workers that they employ. In the 21st century, we are going to deal with two terms of President Donald Trump in office. One of his main goals is to centralize as much power as possible by eliminating entire government agencies and installing loyalists within the other branches of government in order to be able to bypass them to essentially insert himself as a dictator who can call the shots and essentially do whatever he wants. So, a little reason as to why he was even able to get such a following and be elected to terms was due to his supporters' massive distrust of different government agencies. Take, for example, the CDC, Department of Education, um, miscellaneous law enforcement agencies, the IRS. The right wingers are extremely skeptical of these agencies because their entire motto, their entire philosophy of how a government should be ran is that it should be ran as thin and as lightweight as possible and keep the government as small as possible to keep them from interfering with our freedoms as citizens, right? And on theory, that might sound good, but in practice, it leads to many other things. One of them being unchecked free markets, right? Some of these government agencies are in charge of regulating the capitalistic markets that we have to endure today. And if those agencies aren't allowed to do what they're supposed to do, we end up in more severe late stage capitalism. Little quotes right here. Once upon a time, we owned things. Now we rent everything. Even if you buy a movie on Amazon Prime or download it from Netflix, their terms can change anytime, and you never technically own anything tangibly. Now, the government isn't directly responsible for these companies implementing these business models, but they're able to implement these business models because they go completely unchecked by governmental regulations and they remain unchecked by any competition because in late stage capitalism, they own the monopoly. They've either bought out or squashed any competition, and the odds of a startup being able to compete with them are next to nothing. So, inevitability of capitalism. According to Bastani, capitalist realism is best summed up with a single sentence. It's easier to imagine the end of the world than the end of capitalism. And to be clear, capitalist realism is what he thinks we're currently enduring right now. Now, the gap in that argument is that I really don't even think it's capitalism. His entire claim rests upon the assumption that people are so indoctrinated into capitalism that it'll never go away. And at face value, he's totally correct. But what I'm saying is that these people that support capitalism and free markets and central governments, overall right-wing ideologies, the ones who support them to such extreme extents don't even realize that at a certain point, these far right policies end up becoming more communist, more far left than anything in actuality. Now, how can that be, right? I'm going to get there. Let's take a look at capitalistic and communistic traits. So in capitalism, we have free markets, private ownership, and class distinction. Communism, we have no private ownership, a central government that controls everything, that owns everything, and no class distinction, right? So if we take a step back, if we have extremist right wingers that are pushing for complete unregulated capitalism because they're in support of private ownership, well, all they've really done is consolidate all of that private ownership to a very small ruling class, right? While the consumers don't own anything anymore, they rent everything. So, in actuality, how is that any different from communism, right? Yeah, technically it's not the government, but what I'm trying to say is that in reality, what really is a government, right? if one organization of any kind has the power to influence the laws, to have complete leverage over everybody and have complete power over everybody, is the government really the government anymore? Or is it that or is it that private company that you've allowed to get too powerful to stop, even too powerful for the government itself to stop, right? So if this company owns everything and makes it to where the rest of the people will never own anything, that's essentially communism. It's privatized communism in a way, right? Let's talk about class distinction, right? In capitalism, you generally have a lower class, which is going to be found in any economic system, but also a strong middle class and then a relatively small upper class, right? In communism, there's no class distinction. Everybody is equal, right? But in reality, that's not even necessarily true. Everybody's generally the same, except for the people who are in charge and making the decisions. So you have a few people who have all the power and are treated as superior to the other 99%. Sounds a little like what we have going on with this privatized communism, where the middle class is completely being eradicated in real time. Almost everybody is struggling to pay their rent. They're struggling to keep up with these subscriptions. And you have a very, very small class of people at the top controlling it all. Sound familiar? Hopes of a utopia. We're going to dive into why some of this radicalization even starts to take place with a little quote. The entrepreneurial elite is promoting a grand dream of a future where machines do all the work and deliver us economic prosperity. These visions of robots taking our jobs make us uneasy, but they also encourage us to stay fixated on the brighter and distant tomorrow, past the precarity, injustices, and the unpleasantries of now. Now, if you were to take out the words entrepreneurial elite, it sounds a little bit like communist propaganda from back in the 19th century, as shown with this image here, talking about peace, land, and bread. That was a common phrase that was used to rile up the Russians in order to generate enthusiasm for communism as this perfect, idealistic, like utopia-driven economic ideology that would benefit everybody. Similar to this one, it's preaching about injustices, about a distant tomorrow, past the precarity and the unpleasantries of now. They're kind of making it seem out to be like this perfect solution, right? But it's not working out that way, and data can prove that it's not working out that way. And who's proponing it? The entrepreneurial elite, right? That small class that wants to control everybody else. And they're trying to sell that dream, right? So people are, of course, going to give me a lot of backlash over this take. They're going to think there's no way you can even compare having a government control everything versus having a company control everything. Because in theory, right, in capitalistic theory, there would always be competition for companies, right? The companies would always be able to rise up and undercut the monopolies, but that's just not the case, right? Reality gives the insight to how these systems tend to play out, right? Take a look at other theoretical ideas, trickle down economics, they just don't work, right? And the data can prove that. But I'm going to talk about a quote. People tend to regard the Trump moment, this post-truth alternative facts moment, as some inexplicable and crazy new American phenomenon. In fact, what's happening is just the ultimate extrapolation and expression of attitudes and instincts that have made America exceptional for its entire history. Now, this was a quote by Anderson when he is talking about people living in fantasy land. And that's what I would say to all of these people that think that going far right can never be the same as ending up on the far left. And this quote just demonstrates that no matter what economic statistics you show to these people to show them that their beliefs are totally wrong in what they're trying to achieve, they'll never believe it because they think America is immune to communism. They think America is immune to failure, and that the only way to fix it, or the only way to keep it that way, is to stay as conservative as possible for out of some sense of thinking that they know what they're doing. So why is this all important? Because at the end of the day, people need to understand the consequences of what they're doing, right? You can't have a society in where people can continue and continue to eat up misinformation and become indoctrinated with misinformation and not expect for there to ever be any serious consequences on the population. You have to show the importance of being educated and listening to people who know what they're talking about, whether it be economics or science or any other domain that's incredibly complex. So, yeah, that was my TED Talk. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope I was able to provide some unique analysis, and thank you.